By this point, you all have probably heard the big news in Maryland politics. Dan Cox, the former gubernatorial candidate for the GOP, has re-entered, or has entered this race to be the next governor in the Republican primaries here in Maryland. He wants to do an epic rematch against Wes Moore, the current governor. And so a lot of people were talking about it. They're like, wow, Dan Cox has entered the race. A lot of people speculated that he was going to try to run for Frederick County executive. Now, let's remember that in 2022, when he ran for governor against Wes Moore, he did lose by more than a factor of 2 in the general election against Moore. So Wes Moore ended up getting 65% of the votes, and Dan Cox ended up getting 32% of the vote. So it was a pretty resounding defeat. It was a major loss for the Republican Party for the governor's race. It was one of the biggest gubernatorial losses we've had in quite a while, in many decades. And of course, that was upsetting for me too. I was 16 at the time, maybe 17 back in 2022. But that was the first election that I was kind of involved in, that I was interested in Maryland politics. My mother didn't want to go and vote. She was kind of iffy about it. She didn't really care. And I was really intent upon it. I'd seen all the ads, I'd seen all the debates, I was looking at all the signs and things like that. I was getting interested in politics. And I had a car at this point, and I said, Mom, I want to take you to the polling place, which is at my middle school, my old middle school, Corcoran Middle School. And I said, I want you to vote. And so I helped her vote. She didn't really want to. She didn't really have much interest, so I just filled out the stuff for her. I said, is this okay? Is this okay? She said, I don't know. I said, okay, I'll do it for you then, Mom. Don't worry. And of course, I voted for Dan Cox for my mother. So my mom voted for Dan Cox. Okay, don't worry. Voter fraud, no voter fraud. But I was upset about it. There are many different reasons, many different factors as to why that could have been. One of the main reasons which people say is that he was endorsed by Trump, that he was a little bit too MAGA, he was a little bit too America first. He was just a little bit too far right for the Maryland public, and that's why he lost so resoundingly. Now, there are other people who have speculated that it's because the Maryland GOP didn't support him as much. He was running in a contested primary against Kelly Schultz. I believe that's how you pronounce her name, and she was the Commerce Secretary under Hogan. And the Maryland Republican establishment apparently really was behind her and wanted her to win the election for the primaries because she was a more moderate choice. They thought she could appeal to more Democrats, more independents than Dan Cox could because of his MAGA persona, because of his affiliation with the New Right. But he beat her pretty majorly. He got about 52% of the vote in the primary, and she got about 43% of the vote. So almost 10 points. He beat her pretty well. And so people speculate that maybe it's because the MDGOP didn't support him that much, and that's why there was such a large margin. The third reason, and this is something that Giordana Schiffinelli, who was his lieutenant governor candidate, his running mate, has speculated in the past and even mentioned, because I called her at one point, I said, hey, Giordana, I heard that you did a lot of great work with the Somerset Board of Elections, not Board of Elections, Board of Education. And so I said, if you'd like to do an interview with the Maryland Maverick at some point, I'd be interested in doing that. I think it'd be interesting. She's a real firecracker, okay? Let me just tell you, I think it was riveting talking to her. I did about 1% of the talking. She did like 99%, okay? She was very energetic, very passionate. I know that people had their problems with her, and I haven't really done too much research about the history of Giordana and the Republican Party, but I was just entranced because she's like a lawyer and she's just like really bloodthirsty. She's like, I will fucking fight the Democrats to the death and stuff. And I was like, whoa, okay. It was like, boom, right in your face. Very, very aggressive. And I guess that's the kind of lawyerly political spirit. And I was like, okay, interesting. People like Giordana speculate that Dan Cox wasn't really getting out there and talking to people as much as he could have, or wasn't really doing as much publicity work as he could have done, wasn't as energetic as he could have been, speculating that he might not have too much charisma or too much energy or too much charm and appeal to voters. So there are three main speculations as to why he lost so badly against Wes Moore. But that's just an analysis of Dan Cox himself, because of course it's a newsworthy topic now that he is in the race again. So I want to talk a little bit more about the broader GOP pool, all the people that are currently in the primary, because now it is becoming a contested primary. Now, there are two people, I think one of them is named Brenner or something, Bruner, Carl Bruner, and Kurt Wedekind. I have no idea who those individuals are. I think one might have been a former delegate. I honestly have no idea. I've never really met these individuals. I have met John Myrick, though, and he's one of the main contestants in this race. He was one of the first ones to file for governor in Maryland for the Republican primary. He's run for office in the past. He ran for Senate back in 2024, and a lot of people support him because he's talked to a lot of folks. He's been to a lot of events, a lot of fairs. I actually, individually, as an individual, I helped him table at one point back in maybe June or July or something like that at a Greek festival in Baltimore. He's a great guy. He's a nice guy. There's now Dan Cox, who's become one of the, I guess because he has that name recognition, a lot of people are talking about him now. He won the primary back in 22. And then, of course, we have Ed Hale. And Ed Hale is not filed yet, but he is running a pretty good campaign for governor. Now, he used to be a Democrat. He was a Democrat for basically all his life, and he was going to primary Wes Moore, but he decided to go a different route. And so he changed his affiliation to Republican, and now he's running for the Republican primaries. So a lot of people speculate, oh, he's a rhino. He's only doing this. He's only running for the Republican primary because he couldn't have beat Wes Moore in the Democrat primary. He is simply a Democrat that is using the Republican name now. I'm not sure as to whether or not that's true or false or somewhere in between, but that is kind of this. Those are some of the speculations about Ed Hale, but a lot of people in the Republican base in Maryland are really supporting him too, and they're really behind him. And he's done a lot of publicity work. A lot of publicity, great website, all these things. He's a businessman. He's been a businessman for many years. I think he's in his 70s or so, but he's very wealthy at the same time. So he's invested a lot of money into the campaign already, but he hasn't filed yet. And the only other person who could possibly file or who could possibly announce their candidacy is the Senate the Senate Minority Leader, Steve Hershey. And he's kind of contemplated it. I think he set up like an investigative committee. He's toyed with the idea, he's flirted with the idea of running for governor, but we're not sure as to whether or not he's even going to do that because the filing deadline is in less than a month. And there's been no word on whether or not he will. We'll see about it. I don't know if he necessarily wants to lose his position as Senate Minority Leader in the House of Delegates. So I think that's the main thing that's inhibiting him from deciding to run for governor. And his name recognition isn't really that great either. He doesn't have like Hogan-level name recognition. I've already talked about Dan Cox a little bit. I want to talk about John Myrick. And this is purely analysis. This is purely my political analysis. This isn't anything personal. He's been in the race since, I believe, May of 2024. If I'm not mistaken, I believe that is when he entered the race. There are some problems with his candidacy. And again, before I say this, I want to just let you know that I'm saying this all publicly. So I'm not talking behind anyone's back. I'm stating this in my own professional political opinion. Okay, just to clarify. And I've met him many times, great guy, had a lot of conversations, a lot of talks. I even helped him campaign at one point, maybe 2 times. I think 2 times, actually. The last time, from what I understand, from what I was able to find, that he ran for a position was in the Senate 2024 race. And that was the one that Hogan won back in 2024, but which he lost against Angela Alsobrooks in the primary, in the general election. So there were 7 Republican candidates in that race. Hogan was the front runner. He won about 60, maybe 67% of the vote or something like that, I think. Robin Ficker, who's a firebrand himself, he has some name recognition, and he's been involved in politics for a while. I think he's ran like every year or every 2 years since like 1970 or something. He's been in the game for a while, and he always runs. He got about 27% of the vote, maybe 26%. And then there were about 5 other candidates who got like single-digit votes. And one of those people is John Myrick. John Myrick got about 1.74% of the vote in that Senate primary. And so that put him at like 3, at number 3 out of 7. Or the lowest 3, rather. So there was one person who got like 0.4%, another person who got 0.7%, and then he got like 1.7%. A couple other people got like 2, 3%. Some people got like 6 or 7%, whatever. And so he was one of the lowest vote getters in regards to percentages. So that's already a problem. That's already concerning in regards to viability in being able not only to win the primary for the Republican Party in the gubernatorial race, but also to beat Wes Moore, who has a bunch of money, a bunch of staffers, a bunch of volunteers, a lot of charisma, a lot of charm, a lot of energy, great liar, the perfect kind of politician blend, if you could think about it. Great smile, big muscles, all these kinds of things. And again, a lot of political connections, a lot of money, a lot of resources. So that's concerning. If you want to even come close to being competitive with someone like Wes Moore, who again has all those benefits that I just listed, you want someone who has at least a decent track record of being able to pull in votes and make some wins and make some gains. John Myrick doesn't seem to fit that meld. Unfortunately for John Myrick, it seems like 1.7% of the vote in a Senate primary with 7 people is those are some very concerning numbers to say the least. Another thing that I want to say is when it comes to presentation, speaking, politics, being theatrical, because I'm a big believer in the fact that regardless of whether or not you're a politician or not, now, I'm under the belief that anyone who runs for public office is a politician. You hear a lot of people say, well, I'm not a politician. And that's how a lot of individuals start. I'm not criticizing that, by the way. It's just I see that always be stated. People say, I'm not a politician. I'm not a politician. Yet they're running for office. So, I mean, isn't the definition of a politician someone who runs for office? I mean, come on, right? Like, even I'd admit that I'm a politician at this point because I'm running for Central Committee. I'm not going to sit here and say, well, I'm not a politician. You know, I've done all these things. I am a politician. Okay, I'm running for office. So that's the first thing. I think a good politician has to be energetic, charismatic, theatrical, performative. It's such a competitive market. And politics is really a blood sport. It truly is. There's no denying it. Politics is a total blood sport. And it's like survival of the fittest. It's like an open field where everyone is throwing spears and knives and shots at each other, metaphorically speaking. Metaphorically speaking. And so you have to have the best of people in there to win elections, especially when you have such high stakes as someone like Wes Moore, who understands that well. And not only understands that, but also has millions of dollars in the bank. And I just want to state a criticism real quick. A political criticism, and you guys can take this as advice for yourselves, for your own campaigns, if you do decide to run at one point in the future. This is for the young people. John Myrick came to speak at my club, Delmarva Conservative Movement. The president is David James. Shout out, David, if you're watching this. And after his speech, said a lot of good things like, I'm going to be your governor, and we're going to do this, we're going to do that. I'll answer your phones when you call. I'll be the most transparent governor ever in Maryland's history. And towards the end, people were asking questions. So I raised my hand. I said, I would like to ask a question. He said, yes, Colin. I said, so Wes Moore is going to have a lot of people out there door knocking for him. He's going to have thousands of volunteers throughout the entire state just doing a lot of get out the vote, door knocking again, giving out literature, all these different things because they got a lot of money, they got a lot of volunteers. If I may, how many doors have you knocked? How many doors has your campaign knocked? How many volunteers do you have door knocking? And he gave me a very disappointing answer, to be honest. And this is public information. I believe this whole interaction, this whole speech was recorded, by the way, so I'm not breaking any kind of news or making something that's confidential public. This is all public information. And he says, well, we have about 200 volunteers throughout the state, but we're not knocking doors. Because it's a state election, it's going to be really difficult to knock all these doors. So we're just not going to invest those resources into knocking doors. And my first thought was, well, that's not politically strategic. If you want to win an election, a primary election, let alone a general, you got to knock a lot of doors. You got to talk to voters. You got to give out your literature. So I asked a follow-up question and I said, well, what do you mean by that? How are you going to wrestle with the fact that Wes Moore does and will have thousands of people knocking doors throughout the state. How are you going to reach voters? How are you going to reach thousands and thousands, tens of thousands of voters without yourself and a bunch of volunteers for you knocking on a bunch of doors? And he said, well, again, we're not really going to focus on the door knocking. We're more so we're just going to focus on I'm going to go to churches and talk to people there because people at church have conservative values. So we're just going to go to churches and talk to people. And to say that I was disappointed by this is an understatement. So if you ever run for office, whether you run for dog catcher or president of the United States, just know that you have to knock doors. Door knocking is absolutely essential, because if you don't, you will lose. Your opponent will knock doors, they'll talk to a lot more people, they'll give a lot more literature out. The people will see that they're ambitious enough to come to their door, knock on it, talk to them, that they have the boldness. Regardless of what office you run for, you always have to canvass. You always have to door knock. There's no getting around it. If you're asked by a political operative or someone who's very involved in politics whether or not you're going to knock doors, never say, well, actually, we're not going to knock doors, because then people don't take you seriously. That's just the truth of the matter. That's just the hard truth. Sorry to say it, I got to say it, okay? I'm not in the business of protecting people's feelings. Anyways, I want to talk about Ed Hale a little bit. I realize that he's been a Democrat for all his life. He hasn't really been involved in the Republican Party and politics. And there's a possibility that if he does win the election, the primary, and then beats Wes Moore, that he could be a rhino. That he could just switch up and become like a Democrat in sheep's clothing and Republican clothing. Who knows? What I will say is that he's a businessman. Is that he's built buildings, he's built companies, he's made a lot of money, he's got a lot of money. And if you look at his website, if you look at his social media outposting, if you look at all these things, his team masters it. And if you think about it, business people are so good at politics because business is all about advertising, marketing, sales, closing. And all those things are directly intertwined with politics, campaigning, getting voters, getting people to vote for you, getting people to volunteer for you. All of those things are intertwined with sales, with marketing, with getting out the word. So if you have a successful businessman, if you have someone who's successful in business, they're very likely to be successful in politics as well. That's why Trump was so incredible when he ran for president. When he ran in the primaries, that was crowded with like 16 or 17 people. I mean, it was crazy. And he won. He won that primary. He knew how to brand. He knew how to just retort, how to punch back at people. He didn't care. He was actually not a politician. He had never run for anything. And people were skeptical about Trump because he was a Democrat. He was registered as a Democrat for many years, but then he filed to run as a Republican. People were very skeptical. They thought he was a rhino. And he proved everyone wrong. He proved everyone that he was a true conservative, a true right-wing figure that has really changed American politics for the better. So I'm not necessarily very concerned by the fact that this individual, Hale, has been a registered Democrat for many years. Because at the end of the day, that was the same boat that Trump was in. And people change. People change their position, and honestly, if he's catering to get the Republican voters to come out, as a businessman, he's going to appeal to his consumers. And in this case, consumers are the voters, the constituency. And so I feel like as a businessman, as someone who knows how to market, as someone who knows that in order to sell a product, which is yourself, the brand, you got to actually deliver on results. You actually have to make some legitimately good platforms for the people who are going to be coming out to vote. Because let's just face it, I mean, we can't rely on flipping a bunch of, when it comes to the governor's race, how many Democrats are really going to flip and vote for a Republican? Not many. Not many at all. So what you really got to focus on is getting the Republicans that are registered out to vote, hoping that not too many Democrats go out to vote, which is always difficult because in midterms they are more likely to. Democrats are more likely to vote in midterms. and also getting out independents and unaffiliated people to go out and vote. Getting more people that have never voted before or that have never been registered to go and vote for you. And that involves a lot of publicity, a lot of media, knowing how to game the system, knowing how to effectively use the system of politics and capture the public's attention, do some really media-worthy events. That's really how it's done. And it takes a lot of understanding of media, of performance, of theatrics, and knowing what issues to capitalize on. When it comes to someone like Dan Cox, I was looking at the brief little platform that he gave to the Frederick Reporter or a Frederick newspaper. And one of the platforms that he said, and this was towards the end, and now energy, of course, is a big problem in Maryland. It's one of the biggest problems that people are facing now. His statement in regard to energy is clean, self-sustaining energy without overwhelming the electricity grid. Clean, self-sustaining energy, clean energy. Like honestly, at this point, we need dirty energy, okay? We need fossil fuels, we need coal, we need dirty energy because that is what's cheaper. That's what's more effective. We have the infrastructure to provide that. I don't care about clean energy. I don't care about the Green New Scam, windmills, solar grids, and things like that. That's not needed at this point. People are paying so much more money in energy bills because Democrats are closing down coal plants. They're closing down fossil fuel plants, places that are actually providing natural gas and natural energy to the residents of Maryland. They're closing them down. We don't need a platform on clean, self-sustaining energy. That is absolutely not understanding what people are going through in the state of Maryland. And when Republicans see that, it's like, what Republican sees that and is like, oh yeah, I'm going to vote for Dan Cox now. Yeah, he wants to do clean and self-sustaining energy. It's like, no one cares. No one cares about clean, self-sustaining energy. Like, maybe it's just me. I don't know. Maybe it's just me. But I'd rather have dirty energy and traditional fossil fuel-based energy that is cheaper, that is more affordable, that is more available to Marylanders than what's currently going on, the Green New Scam that Wes Moore and his cronies are implementing. As it stands right now, if I had to bet, and this isn't an endorsement from myself, now I am able to make an endorsement personally if I wanted to, but I'm not going to at this time. If I had to bet, if I had to hedge my bets, I would honestly think that Ed Hale will probably win this. And I'd probably bet like $500 on that, honestly, because, you know, he has the businessman appeal. He has the money. He is able to market himself in a way that the other candidates really haven't been able to. You know, and you look at his website, you look at his social media, you look at his literature, it's all like top notch. It's all pretty good. So that's just my opinion at the moment. Who knows, maybe it'll change, but that's what I think. Thank you all for watching this video. I appreciate it. Thank you for listening to my analysis, to my opinions. We'll see how this plays out as time progresses. We'll see if anyone else files to run. Ed Hale, again, is still not filed, but he does seem to be like leading as it pertains to public perception from comments, from people that are resharing, from likes on Facebook, on Instagram, all these things. But anyhow, that's my analysis at the moment. Thank you for watching and have a good day.